Shall we? Oh my goodness, it's so loud. Well, before we get going, I wanted to make sure that everyone is where they should be. So raise your hands who love shopping as much as I do. Okay, well, I hope by the end of the session, the amount of hands will change. But hello and welcome everyone to our breakout session. It's truly an honor to see so many innovative faces here gathered to learn about the immersive shopping experience with Amazon Anywhere. My name is Maria. I am a Senior Business Development Manager at AWS. I'm a part of the account team supporting Amazon as a customer. Here we have Steve, Director of Engineering at Amazon, and Alan, Engineering Lead at Amazon Anywhere. In today's rapidly evolving digital landscape, the way we shop is undergoing a revolution. Just think how many boxes are being delivered to your house weekly. In my case, it's daily, and my husband is absolutely unhappy about that. But that's a separate story. Traditional retail is no longer limited to the brick-and-mortar stores. Instead, it's expanding into the boundless realms of digital landscape. Immersive shopping experiences powered by cutting-edge technologies are redefining and blurring the way we shop. So today, we are going to talk about Amazon Anywhere. We'll explore the transformative power of immersive experiences. We will discuss how these experiences reshaping the way we shop and also drive the business growth. Steve and Alan will share their insights and practical takeaways, and you will also have a chance to ask your questions and network with Amazon Anywhere team after the session. As we embark on this journey, I encourage you to embrace the spirit of curiosity and creativity. Let's challenge the status quo. Let's think of the creative ideas that hopefully will emerge in your head after the session, and hopefully we'll have new ways of how we shop in future. Let's have some fun. Steve, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Steve Macbeth. I'm a director at Amazon. I haven't been to AWS reInvent for about 12 years. This was my second time coming. 12 years ago, I attended when I was working at Microsoft, and it was a very eye-opening experience for me, seeing where the cloud computing was and where the open source tool chains were relative to the technology we were using in-house to build scalable online systems was a really profound moment for me. And I feel like coming back now 12 years later in this moment of both immersive shopping, which we're going to talk about today, and generative AI, which is, I imagine, why many of you are here. I think there's the same kind of profound change happening in the industry. So we've been looking at our customer base and trying to understand where the next generation of customer is different from the current generation and where they're the same. One of the things that is unique about the next generation is that they've grown up and been raised in a world of digital technology. And so the shoppers and customers and consumers that are coming of age today were born after the .NET bust. And so they've lived in a world where the internet is well established, online services are prevalent, and their world is very immersive. Their video, their social media, how they interact with technology, even the physical world is becoming more and more immersive. And we think that changes the way people want to shop. It changes the degree to which people want to be able to shop in the context of what they're currently doing. And the work that we've been doing around Amazon Anywhere is a mechanism that we believe can start to bridge that gap between the inspiration you're achieving in whatever immersive experience you are or in the real world, and the ability to buy or share the things that inspire you. So a little bit about Amazon. How many people have shopped on Amazon? Yes.
Quite a few, right?
Yes. So at Amazon, we talk about selection, price, and convenience. And we believe these are the fundamental levers that help us build trust with customers. It's why people come to Amazon. You can have a high confidence that the thing you want is available. You can have high confidence that it's at a low price. And you can be assured that it's going to get delivered on time. And if there's any problem with it, you can return it. At Amazon, we talk about a flywheel around these mechanisms. And that flywheel has allowed us to grow and scale the business over time. And the way that flywheel works is that as customers come and buy and generate profit, we reinvest that profit back in increasing our selection or decreasing our price or increasing convenience. And so that then drives more people to come to the site because it has more selection, better pricing, and more convenience, generating more profit, which we invest back. And so it's that flywheel that drives the growth of the Amazon retail business. And it's allowed us to get to this scale and to this size. And as we start to think about where we want to go to bridge that gap I talked about, we want to be able to bring that massive selection, low prices, and convenience to where inspiration is being generated. And so Amazon Anywhere is this basic idea that when you have an inspiration, if you're watching a show or watching a sporting event or in the real world, you want to be able to bridge the moment of inspiration that you have and the ability to purchase. And so Amazon Anywhere was that idea, and the team set out to build a set of APIs and capabilities to enable any developer to integrate that capability into their own experience, to basically empower your audience to discover and purchase projects from Amazon. So bring that Amazon flywheel into your application. One of the challenges that an immersive experience has is that the experience breaks down when you have to move out of the immersion. And so every time you take a customer out of that, it's less immersive. And the value of immersive experiences is that you can sort of let the side things in your life fade away for a moment. You know, when you're watching a movie, sometimes you forget that you're in a movie theater and it's just the movie that's consumed you because it's very immersive. If you're watching a sporting event, if you're traveling in the world, it's these moments of presence that we have that are profound. And when you have a distraction in those moments, it breaks that immersion. And Amazon Anywhere is trying to solve that problem. The more immersed our customers are, the more value we see in allowing them to purchase the things they want without breaking that immersion. Or share the things that they see, the things that have inspired them with friends and family. And so very often for me, and I'm sure this is true for many of you, when you see that moment of inspiration, you want to capture it for yourself, you want to act on it, you want to share it with somebody. But today there's quite a bit of friction in that process. The mechanisms in which you can understand what you have to do next is very high friction. And so if you're watching a show and you have that moment of inspiration, and you want to try to find out how to fulfill that, today you have to remember it after the show. Or you have to bring up your phone and do a Google search. Find a Pinterest board where they talk about the thing that you're doing. Find other people who are interested in the thing and maybe have curated information around that. And then go find where you can purchase that. And often these niche opportunities where you can purchase them aren't a place where you have confidence in buying. And so we really believe there's an opportunity in building a set of capability that can be deeply immersed in the experience, that can be contextual to the experience, that can understand the intent of what you're doing in that immersed experience and surface things that are relevant for you. So our first customer was Niantic. Niantic builds Pokemon Go and recently came out with a game called Peridot. And so this was the very first customer that integrated Amazon Anywhere APIs into their application. So this is a deeply immersive AR game in which you build a dot or hatch a dot, and then you train it and feed it, and it grows. And so here you can see the dot in your kitchen. And we believe that people have an emotional attachment that builds up over time, like any immersive experience. And so if you want to take that emotion of, I'm happy about my dot, I'm excited, it's doing something cute in the kitchen, and translate that into something in the physical world. I want to get a shirt with my dot on it. I want to buy a coffee mug. Whatever it is, whatever representation you want in the physical world of that experience, if you have to leave the experience, again, it starts to break down that immersion. So this is a very simple example where you can go to a curated catalog, find something that helps you represent your dot in the physical world. You have all the benefits of the Amazon purchase experience. You can get whatever size you want. You can see what the delivery guarantee is. You can be confident that if it doesn't fit, you're going to be able to return it. And then when you finish that experience, you go immediately back into the immersive experience. So this is good for the customer in that it's a low-friction way to achieve what they wanted. And it's also good for the developer because you don't drive customers and your audience outside of the existing experience in order to fulfill that inspiration. A few years down the road, I imagine we will look back to this launch as the start of what will have become a normal way to make purchases from within virtual worlds and environments. So this is a quote by my boss, Steve Downer. He's the vice president of the consumer electronics category at Amazon.com. I think what's interesting about this quote is the term normal. So earlier on the Amazon slide, I showed roughly we ship 300 million packages a month in the US, the same day or the next day. At that scale, it's become normal to decide I want something and have it show up on the same day from a catalog of hundreds of millions of products. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this was not normal. This would have seemed like magic. If somebody proposed a business which is, I'm going to have a catalog of 100 million things, and then I'm going to deliver them at the scale of 100 million a month to hundreds of millions of customers, and I'm going to do it the same day, this would have seemed like magic. But today it's normal. It's the expectation we have. People who were born in this environment will expect it. And when they don't get it, they will be disappointed. And so this concept of normal is transitional. What was normal today was magic yesterday. And so we believe that this idea of being able to purchase anything you see, anything you're inspired by, is really important. And it helps create these immersive experiences where you don't have to feel the frustration that happens when you decide, I want to buy this thing. So very often you'll be watching a show and you'll see a present for somebody. You'll think, oh, this is a great idea for a Christmas present for my spouse or for my children. But now you have a moment of frustration. What do I do with that inspiration that I've gotten in that moment? I'm watching a sporting event, I'm watching a movie, I'm out in the real world. I have to catalog it in my own mind. I become the systems integrator. I hold the information about what I want to do. I hopefully remember it when I get back to a moment on my computer or on my phone. And then I have to go do all the work. I have to find it. I have to remember it. A friend of mine, we were watching Ted Lasso, one of my favorite shows, and she saw this dress. And she was like, I want that dress. And she doesn't like searching, so she always sends me these messages. I saw this thing and something, and then can you go find it? It is not easy to find a dress from one TV show. But I did find it, but it was very, very difficult. I had to search for people talking about that episode, and then people commenting on that dress, and then sort of got the parameters of what that dress was called, and then I searched for it, and eventually I could find it. And unfortunately, it was out of stock, and they weren't making it anymore. So she was very, very disappointed. And I was very, very disappointed. And it took a lot of effort. I think most cases, people aren't going to put in that much effort. And those moments of inspiration get lost. And the person who was excited is no longer excited. And so we think we can solve that. Alan's going to spend some time and now take you through the architecture of how we built this solution. And then we'll come back to some of the launches we've had since that first customer.
Thank you, Steve. Let me tell you a little bit about how Amazon Anywhere got started. At Amazon, one of our leadership principles is think big. Thinking big is a great way to challenge our assumptions about what's possible. And Amazon Anywhere came from just such an idea. We imagined a world in which people did not need to go to a store in person or even online to find products and make purchases. In the future, more people may spend more of their time immersed in virtual worlds. How would people find products and make purchases in such experiences? What if we could make immersive shopping experiences that allow them to buy anything, anywhere, and have it delivered to them at home? The first thing that we do when we have an idea like that at Amazon is we write a press release about it and answer any frequently asked questions. This helps us get a clear picture of what we want to deliver for our customers and the benefits it will have. We call this a PR FAQ. We had many ideas for potential features for Amazon Anywhere, but we had to narrow down our feature list to only the most critical features to build for our first prototype. This allows us to quickly build and launch our product, followed by collecting important customer feedback, and afterwards, the cycle can repeat. This diagram shows a simple representation of our core use cases. A customer is interacting with an application on a mobile phone, and this mobile application has access to APIs that enable product selection, such as availability, product information, and pricing, and checkout APIs, such as the preview and confirmation of orders. The application is provided with SDK for developers to make it easy to onboard to the API. Our API must support global Amazon scale, as well as provide analytics on the usage metrics to the business. When a customer makes a purchase, that purchase is delivered directly by Amazon, and all post-purchase customer support is handled by Amazon. As we began thinking through what we wanted to build, we reached out to the account team to validate our design decisions and to provide any suggestions on technology choices we may not have thought of.
Amazon is similar to other AWS customers. They might have a deeper knowledge of some of the AWS services, but they do need some help which services to use and which services to consider. We do maintain the same level of security and isolation with them as we do with any other AWS customer. How many services do you think AWS has? 200 to 50? I think we're getting closer to 300, and after this week, there will be even more. So there can be some blurred lines, which services to pick. When Alan and our team first met, Alan already had a vision, what he wanted to build, which he formed on the examples from AWS blogs. However, he needed some help with networking, who loves networking, authorization, and scaling. We partnered together to understand his requirements and goals in order to put together a solution and a better package of advice. While working with Alan, we also built a few POCs to validate our suggestions and to make sure we share our best practices and mitigate the architectural risk for Amazon Anywhere. I remember Alan was saying, hey, it should work on desktop, mobile, video games. I tried to practice my Alan voice, but I failed. So. We also had less than 8 months to design and deliver a production-ready product. And last but not least, we needed to keep in mind the ambition of Amazon Anywhere team to expand globally. So let's dive deep into the challenges we faced with.
Thanks, Maria. I'll talk about some of the key challenges for the design for Amazon Anywhere. One of the early questions we got from the business was, how can we enable this experience and make it secure? We set out to limit any data sharing to only the minimum amount necessary. We set a high bar for availability at a target of 99.99%, which is the same as many AWS services. While we planned to launch with a single partner, we needed to anticipate the onboarding of multiple clients, and we wanted the design to scale to up to 100,000 requests per second. In the early stages, the product requirements were still evolving, and we had a very short timeline. I faced an important decision to make. Should we start with a microservices architecture immediately, or start with a simpler monolithic design and to meet our deadline, and then consider any future extensibility challenges? Our goal is to enable a seamless developer integration experience. They shouldn't need to be an expert at e-commerce to use our API. We wanted to offer the flexibility to develop in any language on any platform without the burden of coding multiple client libraries. Now that we've discussed the core requirements and key challenges, let's dive into the solution and some of the design decisions that we made. Next, I will walk you through how we designed and built Amazon Anywhere on AWS. We decided to separate the platform into microservices. I want to stop here for a minute because I don't know if everyone here is just sold on microservices and just that's the go-to solution. But when we have short timeline, I remember a comment on one of the design docs that we had from my boss who was like, yeah, we have like 6 months. Are you sure you don't want to do some monolithic solution? Let's get this done. So, we can talk a little bit more about that later. But we decided to split it into microservices. And at the front, we have our gateway. It hosts our public endpoint, and it handles all authorization, authentication, and request routing. Next, we have selection. Our selection service handles all queries for product information, availability, and pricing. There's the ordering service, which handles APIs for checkout, such as the preview and confirmation of orders. Next, we had a need for configuration to store program-specific options and client IDs and other onboarding data. And last, like many businesses, we needed to collect business intelligence data, such as the number and types of orders created through this platform. Our best practice involves partitioning each service into dedicated AWS accounts, further separated by environment stage, such as beta and prod, and region, such as North America and Europe. This approach has several key benefits. It ensures the isolation of each service, minimizing any potential impact to bad deployments or other failures. It also more readily accommodates organizational growth, allowing for finer-grained access controls in the future transfer of ownership. It also reduces the risk of AWS service limit contention around AWS account quotas. And we can capture all costs associated with each service within that account's billing, facilitating better cost management. Let's start with our gateway and some of the common security threats and how AWS services helped us solve those.
When we started talking about security, we compared basically the benefits of the main AWS security services through the lens of common security threats. So if we look at web exploits and bots, APIs are susceptible to attacks from malicious bots and automated scripts that can compromise the service availability. And this is where AWS Web Application Firewall, or AWS WAF, can help protect against those threats. Distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks. Your APIs can get overwhelmed with a flood of traffic causing service disruptions. AWS Shield and AWS WAF can help to detect and mitigate DDoS attacks in real time. Worth mentioning Route 53 and Route 53 health checks in combination with DDoS protection, and that can actually reroute your traffic from the infected services. Data tampering and replay attacks. Attackers can actually attempt to tamper your API clients and API endpoints. So this is where AWS Certificate Manager, or ACM, steps in and helps you easily provision and manage and deploy your TLS certificates. And ACM can also mitigate common threats like data tampering, malicious attacks, and phishing attacks.
Now that we've had solutions for registering our domains, TLS certificates, and handle common security threats, let's determine how we'll handle authentication, authorization, and request routing. Let's talk about some of our requirements. There are two types of authentication that we needed for Amazon Anywhere. The first is client authentication. We needed to be able to identify our clients, provide different configurations for each client, and track usage metrics. This level of authentication is useful for querying of APIs that do not require customer context. This is information like public product data, information and pricing. The second level of authentication that we needed was customer authentication. We had a need to identify customers through account linking. Customers can review and accept or deny any data sharing permissions. This level of authentication enables APIs that query or respond with user or customer context. This, for example, tailoring the estimated delivery date to your personal location and Prime status. Remember, one of the early questions we got from the business was, how can we enable this and make it secure? Obviously, we can't have customers need to share their Amazon credentials. That would not be acceptable. Our solution for this was to integrate with Login with Amazon. Login with Amazon is an existing service that allows third-party applications and websites logging into third-party applications and websites using your Amazon account. It's based on the industry standard OAuth 2.0 protocol, which allows application developers to access permitted user data without sharing account credentials. While I find OAuth to be a very interesting topic, and I think I spent several days reading all of the RFCs on OAuth, I won't go into all the details here, other than to say that integrating with Login with Amazon was a design decision and a key requirement for Login with Amazon. Maria will now share the options that we considered for implementing our authorization and request routing.
I feel like I'm getting good exercise getting up and down all the time. So let's dive into the comparison of Amazon API Gateway and application load balancers. With Amazon Anywhere, we compared these two services from the angle of routing, authentication, and scaling. Both API Gateway and application load balancers boast impressive features when it comes to routing. They can easily handle URL routing, making it efficient navigation through the digital landscape. They both also support Cognito, which in its turn is compatible with majority of auth providers, including Login with Amazon. If that's all you need, that's very easy. You can pick both, or either. With Amazon Anywhere, it wasn't that easy. We needed more customization, more flexibility, and this is where API Gateway stepped in with its custom authorizers, and actually enabled us to implement the level of customization we needed, delivering distinct authorization levels tailored to our needs. So, and lastly, scaling. Both can scale to your needs if you really need to, but API Gateway comes with initial limit of 10,000 requests, which can always be increased, and application load balancer can scale indefinitely. So in a nutshell, if you look at these two, and if your requirements align with straightforward routing and authorization, you can pick any. But if you need the level of customization we needed, API Gateway might be your best choice.
Thanks, Maria. Let's walk through how we use API Gateway, custom Lambda authorizers to implement basic client authentication using API keys. The client sends a request to our API Gateway with the API key and the authorization header. Now, API Gateway is totally capable of using this API key to directly handle authorization to the underlying resources. But another option is to allow our Lambda authorizer to get this API key and return it in the request context. We'll see how this is helpful in the next slide. But for now, the API key is simply returned, and API Gateway uses the associated API key to evaluate access to the underlying resources. Now, let's talk about customer authentication. The client first communicates with Login with Amazon to initiate the account linking and to receive an access token. This token is provided as a bearer token in the authorization header to our API Gateway, which then sends this token to our custom Lambda authorizer. The Lambda authorizer then validates this access token with our auth server, Login with Amazon, and retrieves the customer ID and the Login with Amazon client ID. Another important action that we take here is we load our configuration and we look up the associated API key with that client, Login with Amazon client ID. This means that it's easy for our clients, as they only need to provide one authorization header, either the API key or the access token, and we are always able to use the right level of authentication while still tracking usage metrics with the correct client's API key. Last, API Gateway evaluates the generated IAM policy to allow or deny access to the underlying resources. Let's update our architecture now that we've shown solutions for authorization and request routing for a public endpoint. We now have AWS Shield and Web Application Firewall, which apply policies to our endpoint, hosted by API Gateway, which has an authorization lambda that integrates with login with Amazon. Now, let's compare our compute options for hosting our service logic.
There are various compute options available at Amazon. The choice is fully on you and your requirements. So if we look at Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2, it provides scalable virtual service in the cloud. You can pick from general purpose, memory optimized, security optimized. You can scale your instances up and down. You can customize your operating system, install any software. Comes at a price, operational overhead. You're fully responsible for managing your EC2 instances. If you look at Elastic Container Service, or ECS, it allows you to run Docker containers at scale, provides a scalable, highly customizable container orchestration service. Also comes at a price. If you never dealt with containers before, that might be a challenge. However, I really wanted to mention AWS Fargate that allows you to run containers without managing the underlying infrastructure. AWS Lambda, serverless computing service that brings all the headaches away, however, comes with the time limit, 15 minutes per invocation. So in a nutshell, if you look at control versus abstraction, EC2 gives you maximum control, ECS allows you to run containers in the cloud, and Lambda allows you maximum abstraction. Scalability, all three services are very scalable, but again, Lambda excels here in automatic scaling. And use case suitability. EC2 is very versatile. ECS brings a certain level of complexity. AWS Fargate mitigates that complexity. And Lambda obviously brings the serverless perfection to the table. So me and Alan had a bit of a back and forth when we were looking at compute options. So let's have a look at what he ended up using.
Thanks. First, I knew we wanted to focus on serverless options. We don't have any need to manage our own EC2 instances. As a developer, I know that managing host patching and EC2 host type migrations is a lot of fun, but operationally it's time consuming and very expensive. We wanted to optimize for low latency and continuous traffic with the ability to scale to many thousands of requests per second. And for those reasons, we decided on AWS Fargate as our compute option. We could have used Fargate for our selection service and maybe Lambda for ordering, as each service has different scaling requirements. But for simplicity, we decided to standardize on one solution for each of our services. Now that I've explained why we selected Fargate for our backend services, let's add that to our architecture diagram and discuss how we connect our services to the API gateway and the necessary networking. Let's remind ourselves of a few key goals. First, the microservices should not need to have any public endpoint. The gateway is responsible for all authorization needs. Second, we also had a need to enable end-to-end encryption between our gateway and each microservice to meet our high security bar. Our infrastructure is deployed across multiple availability zones. The gateway in each service has a VPC. To load balance between container instances, each service has a network load balancer. We needed to create targets for API Gateway to access this load balancer. However, AWS enforces strict account boundaries, and it's not possible to set a target for API Gateway that is a network load balancer in a different account. Therefore, we used AWS Private Link to create endpoints that link between our VPCs from the gateway to each microservice. Each service has another network load balancer that routes to these endpoints for each availability zone and serves as the target for API Gateway. This is one area that I found it particularly helpful to review with the AWS account team. It was great to get a second look at how we were implementing the network to ensure that we had the right design and the right number of resources. AWS Private Link does not provide end-to-end encryption by default. TLS from our gateway must be terminated from the client to the gateway to enable things like authorization, authentication, and request routing. To enable encryption between API Gateway and each of our microservices, we used a combination of AWS Certificate Manager and Route 53. API Gateway uses Route 53 to locate the endpoint for each microservice and create a new secure connection to each of the microservices. As we build and expand our service, we needed a process for modeling our APIs, including defining common types and validations. We wanted to make it easy for clients to connect in any language and provide a clear documentation on our API specifications. Amazon Smithy is a great solution for all of these needs. Maria, can you tell us more about Amazon Smithy?
Of course. You remember I mentioned that there are like more than 250 services. So that was actually one of those cases when Alan reached out to me asking, what do you think of Amazon Smithy for Amazon Anywhere? I'm like, what? Amazon what? So I needed to do some homework and research and what actually Smithy is. So Smithy is an interface definition language and a set of tools that allows developers to build clients and servers in multiple languages. It's protocol agnostic. It was actually open sourced by AWS in 2019, and we released a 1.0 version in 2020. It provides code generation for clients and services, and also generates HTML documentation and convert model to Open API v3. So on the right, you can see an IDL example with its own syntax that shapes the service operations, resources, and the graph connecting them. So yeah, it turned out to be a great solution for Amazon Anywhere.
Smithy enables Amazon Anywhere to scale our API. Using Smithy, we could thoroughly review the API for each resource during the design phase, such as our products and checkout APIs. We were then able to create shared common shapes within a common package, enabling their use across service models. This allows us to define common types, validations, error definitions, and even the ability to establish custom linters to enforce API consistency. Through Smithy projections, we can then merge these individual models to construct a unified gateway API. This process involves flattening namespaces and selectively incorporating or excluding specific shapes using tags. Smithy tooling can then be used to generate server-side stubs, including language-specific types, client library generation in up to 9 different languages, and HTML documentation containing example requests, responses, and error types. And if all of that's not enough, Smithy can also be converted to Open API v3 specifications, which is another very common industry-standard interface definition language. And one example of using Open API spec is we were able to quickly take our model, convert it to Open API, and then import it into Postman. And Postman is a tool for developing and testing APIs. This allowed us to easily test our API even before we had our first client. So using Smithy, Amazon Anywhere can be easily extended to new functionality. When we onboard new clients, we needed a place to store configuration. This configuration holds information such as client IDs, API keys, and other program-specific options. There are several good options here, including DynamoDB and AWS app configuration. DynamoDB would have been a very reasonable option, but we didn't have any tooling for managing, updating configurations. For our purposes, it was easier to utilize AWS app configuration, as we could create a file for each client configuration and simply submit it through our normal code review process, without the need for any additional tooling. Amazon has a data warehouse like most companies. We needed to provide a connection to our data warehouse to store important business data. One example is keeping track of which orders are placed through Amazon Anywhere. For this purpose, Kinesis Firehose gives us a low-touch, easy mechanism to aggregate individual order events by time or file size. Amazon Lambda provides a convenient data transformation function to organize and format the output. Once each object is created in S3, an SNS event is fired, which then triggers its ingestion into our data warehouse. Amazon Anywhere's infrastructure is defined entirely through infrastructure as code through AWS CDK. Most of you are probably familiar with some form of infrastructure as code. AWS CDK allows us to deploy our infrastructure across different stages, developer accounts, and regions in a consistent and reproducible manner. All infrastructure updates are automated through our deployment pipeline after the code is pushed. CDK has higher level reusable constructs when compared to other like YAML-based infrastructure as code languages. And this allows us to use like secure by default constructs for common AWS resources, as well as implement reusable stacks such as service dashboards to accelerate our development. Here's the final picture of the high-level architecture for Amazon Anywhere. Sorry, let me get everything on there. And I just wanted to say that while we're using this architecture for providing the service for Amazon Anywhere, I think it is a very reusable architecture that many people could use for services that they may be building. Maybe one of you guys would use. So, thanks.
Thank you, Alan. Amazon Anywhere has a very special place in my heart personally. I'm very proud of what we were able to achieve in such a short period of time. I hope you guys really enjoyed our session. I'll pass it to you in a bit to ask your questions, but let me summarize real quick the key takeaways. So AWS CDK, you can bring the power of infrastructure as a code, leveraging AWS CDK. API Gateway and Lambda, a power duo that you can use to create robust APIs. ECS Fargate, you can manage your containers without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. Amazon Smithy, a relatively new tool for defining service APIs, enabling you to precisely define data models, protocols, and documentation. So before we pass it to you, and I hope you prepared a lot of questions, I wanted to give a chance to Steve to talk about the latest launches and the future of Amazon Anywhere.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about the original problem space that we were dealing with. Alan and Maria walked us through the implementation of the architecture. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact that we've had with some more recent releases. And so I talked about our first customer, which was Niantic. About 3 weeks ago, we went live with both Instagram and Facebook integration. And so all of the Amazon ads that are shown in context of your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed are now connected back to a seamless purchase process through Amazon Anywhere integration. So if you click on an ad in the old world, it would take you to Amazon. This is the traditional way for ads to work on websites and in applications. But again, it takes you out of the immersive experience of social media, requires you to complete your transaction, and then when you come back, you have to reacquire whatever you were looking at. And so with this integration, when you click on the ads, the purchase experience is in context now. And so we were able to take the initial customer and then scale it up to the largest social media companies on the planet in 6 months. We were able to do that because we built it on AWS using the architecture that Alan walked us through. And while we were implementing the integration with Facebook for Instagram and Facebook proper, we also launched with Snapchat. So we now have integration through our ad buy on all of those properties across Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. Right now, we're very focused on integration with social media, as you see through these launches, video games, as you saw through the initial partner we had with Niantic. But we think there's a lot of future opportunity. These experiences that we have live today are largely curated experiences. The developer decides which products are available at any given moment. In the future, we believe that there's an opportunity to understand the inspiration, understand the intent in context, and then find the most appropriate products. And so that's where we're looking. And we think video is a great medium to begin to explore that. So the team's hard at work at trying to understand those intentions and how to bring a non-curated experience. We also believe that there's a lot of opportunity in virtual worlds. And so as virtual experiences start to become more and more prevalent, we want people to be able to see what they see in the virtual world and then buy it in the physical world. Like I said at the very beginning, the physical world itself is becoming more and more immersive. And that is happening through integration with QR codes and apps that work in locations. It's also becoming possible through augmented reality. And so again, we think that's another integration point where if you see something in the real world, if you see a product anywhere, if you're inspired by anything in the real world, the opportunity to figure out how do I acquire that, or how do I acquire a representation of that, is possible. So this is where we're going in the future.
Well, as we mentioned, we're all here today, so come talk to us. I would love to have a face-to-face with you. And don't forget to fill in this survey. We're not professional speakers. My voice was shaking a bit. But I hope it's not the last time we are talking to you. So your feedback matters. We're a data-driven company, so the more data we get, it allows us to constantly improve ourselves. Thank you so much. Very nice to see all your faces.